Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Gary, why don't you go on to the next one?
Councilmember Rambo,
Here.
Councilmember Flasher,
Here.
Councilmember Galani,
Here.
and Chair Bartoni.
Here. So thank you very much. Before we get started, I want to welcome Melanie to our first, or her first Planning and Parks Committee meeting. So welcome. And I know that Mayor Boland didn't necessarily do this the other day or give you a chance, but Joe, either you or Melanie, you want to give us just a quick 30-second introduction?
I think that's a great opportunity for Melanie. Thank you.
Did she hear us?
My apologies, I did not.
Well, first, Melanie, just want to welcome you to the Planning and Parks meeting. And if you would, just give us a 30-second introduction of yourself.
Sure, thank you. Sorry, I was trying to get the Zoom and the YouTube set up. My name is Melanie Repito. Prior to being here, I was at the City of Manchester, and before that, Town and Country, Maryland Heights. So I've worked for a few cities. I'm very excited to be here. So far, everything's been great, and everybody's been very welcoming, and I'm excited to be the newest member of this team.
Well, thank you. I know you were very welcomed, and they're very happy to have you. That takes us to approval of minutes. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting, made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Flasher. Is there any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to public input. Melanie or Travis, is there anybody out there looking to speak? I'm trying to see if we have any guests.
Mr. Chair, we just have
We do have
Councilmember
Mr.
Garitano.
Garitano. He's just here to watch and listen. All righty. So that takes us to our action items. By my count, we have 4 planning matters and 5 park matters, and we do have an executive closed session tonight. So the first planning matter is a review of the current fencing and permitting requirements by the City of Wildwood. This was brought up at a recent council meeting by Mayor Boland. So Joe, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as was just described, Mayor Boland has considered how the City of Wildwood treats fences. And for the most part, fencing is probably one of the least regulated items in the City of Wildwood. As is described in the memorandum, in Town Center, there are specific regulations for fencing and its location. But even in that particular instance, in Town Center, the extent of regulations is very limited. For the most part, in Town Center, where the majority of projects are either done through a planned residential overlay district or a C8 planned commercial district, we regulate fences through those site-specific ordinances more so than in a general nature. Outside Town Center, the level of regulation even becomes less. If a fence is 6 feet or less in height, there is no permit requirement, and they can be placed on the property line of the property owner's lot. And so therefore, it is only when a fence is over 6 feet in height is that it becomes a structure, and then a structure does go through a certain review process with the city. It must meet the setbacks of the particular zoning district designation where the lot is located. And in some instances can be reviewed by the Architectural Review Board. So again, it's dependent on height. And for the most part, fences are seldom over 6 feet in height, at least ones we know of. Saying that, as you know, fencing can be controversial. And in many instances, we let those controversies lie or be with the homeowners association. Many of the subdivisions, both in the large lot and more suburban areas, have indentures and restrictions, and often they address fences much more than the city of Wildwood. And the trustees or the architectural committee of the homeowners association generally deal with them on a case-by-case basis. What we've seen of late, though, is more fencing has become, I guess, onerous in that location is being identified as a problem. Surprisingly, we are seeing certain instances where fences are being placed in the front yard areas. In those instances, we've been advised it's because of deer or other concerns regarding trespass. But certainly when fencing becomes a locational concern or if color, material, or other characteristic becomes problematic, there's little at times the city can do. In the memorandum, the department has identified that it believes that we may be at a stage where further investigation is appropriate. And in the memorandum, the department is recommending that the committee authorize that further investigation so as we can determine if time is appropriate for greater review of fencing and a certain permitting process, possibly, or if we find that through the investigation and research, it's not warranted, then certainly it would be an opportune time to at least advise the whole city council and the mayor of such. So tonight, again, the department is seeking direction and in its memorandum is requesting authorization to proceed to the next step regarding this review. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So Joe, are you needing a motion to do that, you think, or are you just like, if the committee says, yeah, let's move that direction?
Given the matter originated in city council and was brought to city council by Mayor Boland, the department would respectfully request a motion tonight if the committee feels this is a matter that needs further study. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rob, go ahead, please.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to lead up to just such a motion, but I want to mention a couple things that I think are important that you consider when you're doing this review. One is the fact that if I ever get around to pulling the trigger on it, I'm going to have a deer fence on my whole property. That's well in excess of a mile of fencing, so it's pretty pricey. And the reason I haven't done it is more a matter of having to do a bunch of clearing and so on and so forth. And so the reason I bring it up is because deer fences, to be effective, have to be a minimum of 7 feet high, and normally 6 feet high is like privacy fence height and so on and so forth. And so I'm hoping that we accommodate folks that want to do deer fencing for purposes of the ecology and so forth, rather than, keep out trespassers and so forth. It feels like it might fall into a different category. I don't intend to have concertina wire on the top of my fence or anything like that, and guard towers and whatnot. Matter of fact, there may be a way to provide a loophole if it provides passage for smaller animals and only blocks the deer. And along with that, I think it probably should be, you should be able to put it very close to the property line, just because you're trying to protect the maximum. I am, in my case, I'm trying to protect the maximum amount of native vegetation and so on and so forth. And so maybe there's a way to require a setback at the front, the front lot line or something like that. I'm just suggesting that deer fence should be a special case, as should barbed wire. They call it the devil's rope for a reason. And I've cleaned up gator bed after gator bed of barbed wire from fencing and cross fencing with no end in sight, it's hard on the animals and it's hard on machines and it's hard on people. And we're stringing a lot of barbed wire out here. And I wonder if there's a way, if other people have come up with creative ways to manage that environment, because there's a whole lot better fencing out there these days with than barbed wire. And so the rest of it, you can figure out: the visual screening, the fact that a lot of people have built privacy fences in front yards, which are unsightly. When I lived in Maryland Heights, they had a requirement to put it couldn't extend any further than the front plane of the home, which might be a good idea for the smaller lot areas or something like that. So I'm not going to suggest anything other than take a good look at deer fence and barbed wire. And I'm going to make a motion that we kick this issue to the department for analysis. And how much time do you think you need?
Given that we're on the eve of the holiday season and coming back, probably not in December, I would like to think by the meeting in January, we could have some preliminary research completed and some conclusions, or at least some suggestions for consideration. Okay,
so 60 days then. Okay, so I'd like to make that motion, return in 60 days with some proposals.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Teresa, are you seconding the motion?
I will second that motion. I would have preferred it be coming back by December, but if January is what we can do, then that's fine. But just to make clear that we're not doing the specifics right now, like Rob is talking about, right? We're just giving this to the director of planning and the city attorney to come up with a plan and to present it, right?
I'm sorry, that was my intention.
Joe, go ahead.
Ms. Clark, I'd like to think that we can have some pretty specific direction if we're given the 60 days as the motion maker has identified. And I do want to note that the memorandum was reviewed by the city attorney as well. So in all instances, the city attorney will play a role in whatever we come back to the committee with in terms of either suggestions, options, or direction.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Teresa. Go ahead.
Yes, if I could follow up. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was thinking on the same lines as Dr. Rambo about the different specifics with the height and the percent area coverage and locations, if the ARB has approval, and who and what type of maintenance, just things like that. But I would second this, and I think that this is a really good thing to do, and I think that already have a good start with the 3 different cities that you've already evaluated, and Town and Country looked like a really good one to model after. So yes, I'll second.
Thank you, Teresa. Is there any other comments or questions? So Joe, I have one for you. You kind of referenced HOAs, and, like the city has a 6-foot, rule in place, so to speak. Subdivision I'm in has 4 foot, but whatever we come up with, is it going to infringe on current HOA indentures?
I think the critical step for the department as well as this committee is to ensure that if we create new regulations for fencing, we do it cognizant of the homeowners associations and what they have. In fact, we could, if it ends up being appropriate under the committee's direction, basically say our regulations do not necessarily circumvent, obviously, the homeowners associations, indentures, and restrictions. So we'll always defer to them, as we do in most instances, for a lot of other things.
Okay, thank you. So that being said, no other, I don't see any other hands. All those, oh, Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick comment. The mayor's concern was largely aesthetic, and so hopefully that'll be a big element of your analysis, Joe.
It certainly will, and obviously we know the circumstance, Fox Creek Veterinary Clinic, and it did change the character of the fencing from something of a very rural nature to something that wasn't very close to that. So from that perspective, we'll look at architectural review for certain types of fences in certain circumstances, and maybe across the board, I don't know. And we'll always have the aesthetics in mind. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, so seeing no other hands, all those in favor of the motion to let the department proceed with the investigation, so to speak, I'll say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, good enough. We'll see. We'll look forward to seeing what you have to come back with in January on that.
Thank you.
Next thing on our agenda is consideration of Urban Night Sky Place designation for City Park. And this one is for Melanie. Go ahead, Melanie.
Good evening. You can hear me okay? Okay, excellent.
Yes.
So the city was recently contacted by the International Dark Sky Association, the IDA, regarding potentially certifying Community Park as an urban night sky place designation. Basically, that designation means that the park doesn't actually qualify for an urban night sky because of its proximity to brightly lit areas, highways, and whatnot, and therefore would be recognized for the recognition for their efforts to educate the public on the benefits of proper outdoor lighting and ensures public safety while minimizing potential harm to natural nighttime environment. The city would have to go through a process in which we would have to take a reading of the lighting in the park and possibly change things. There's quite a rigorous application. However, I spoke with Olivette's Parks Director, and she, is very enthusiastic about the project. Stacy Park in Olivette actually was recently designated about a month ago as an urban night sky program, but she said that it is a lot of work in order to do the actual initial application, and they had a lot of volunteers that helped with it. It was brought to them by residents. And so essentially, if this is something that, if this is a direction that the city would like to go, the department will need to further research exactly, the number of hours and ongoing educational programs that we would have to host and such in order to determine whether it's something that is feasible or not. So we are essentially looking for direction on if this is something that we're interested in. And if so, we will do the necessary research to determine if it's something that the city can do and is worthwhile. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. Melanie, in addition to the work that is required, I guess the pre-work or whatever, is there an application fee? What's the financial tariff on this?
There is an application fee of an initial application fee of $250. The website wasn't clear as to whether there was an annual fee after that, but from the conversation that I had with the Parks Director in Olivet, it didn't sound like it was an expensive program to maintain other than staffing and hosting the events.
Okay, and when you said there was some time involved, do you have any idea like how much staff time would be involved?
So it depends on if there's anybody interested enough in the project to actually volunteer to help. But she is willing to supply a lot of the resources if we do decide to pursue it, and help guide us through the process and the application. And so there is that, but she said she's probably spent about, I think, 25 hours or so herself as the director, in addition to all the volunteers. She said that if it weren't for the volunteers, that it probably isn't something that they would have pursued because she didn't have the staff to do so.
Gotcha. Okay. Rob, go ahead, please. And then I got Dan and Teresa.
I'll wait for those two. I don't want to be dominating the
You're
conversation
not,
here. Go ahead.
you're not. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. The first emails that I got when I joined council were from folks that had moved from the desert Southwest in both cases, and they were dismayed at the lack of visibility of the stars. Now, granted, we're not in the high desert, but still, I have, it's a issue dear to my heart, because the Ozarks, if you look at a map of or a satellite photo of the U.S. at night, there's a dark spot in the Ozarks, which is the darkest night sky, the best area for star viewing anywhere in the east of the Rockies. And I wish that we had more of that around here, because I miss the stars. But you've heard me on council rant about Starlink. That's one of my major complaints with them. And then the Prime Place fixtures, the last meeting, I was concerned because I thought there was going to be a lot more lack of what's called night sky compliance in the industry parlance. And I just want to say that other municipalities have done this, including most recently Pittsburgh. They've regulated night sky compliance, and taking it seriously is a great thing for the bats and the nighttime critters, like all the night jars and bugs and bird navigation and so forth. And it sounds like my green nature is coming out a little more than I meant for it to. There are plenty of other aesthetic benefits, energy benefits, and so forth. I would like us to take this seriously, and maybe this is a cheap and easy pilot program for Wildwood to learn what it takes, and then maybe roll it out more generally over the course of the next few years if Melanie's willing to do that effort. So I support it.
Thank you, Rob. Dan, go ahead, please. Teresa, you're next.
I'm kind of the opposite, but I'm not a big nature guy myself in my nature, but I don't see the huge benefit of this, I guess. That was my initial thought when listening to it. And then secondly, with the proposal of the tennis courts and stuff like that, how would lighting on the tennis courts potentially affect whatever is determined in community park? I mean, could that play into it down the road, and would that take away this distinction for us if we were able to obtain it in the first place? That's all.
Melanie or Joe, do you, I mean, I had a concern also about the hardcore proposal. So do you have a response?
Sure. I have a part response. Again, it's something that we would definitely have to look into further. However, there is lighting that is IDA compliant, which essentially is lighting that faces down and doesn't have the reflection up into the sky. And it's more controlled lighting. And so they have regulations that we would have to meet in the park in order to maintain that status. As far as court lighting, I don't honestly know, if there is court lighting that is ADA or IDA compliant or not, but it's something that I will happily look into. And again, there's definitely a lot more information that we would need to look into, but it sounds doable. A lot of it's also just turning lights off at a certain point in time, and so I assume that courts aren't going to be lit all night, and so that could also play into that as well.
Thank you. Teresa, you're next. And Gary, if you didn't notice, Tracy is here now. So welcome, Tracy.
Got it.
So Teresa, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, I did look up that IDA lighting ordinance and read through it. And I guess my question, I'm all for the dark sky because of the same things that Dr. Rambo had mentioned. But going forward, I'm for the dark sky. At this point, I don't think that in our strategic plan we have finances to make a lot of changes. And so on that ordinance, it looked like to me that we might have to make a number of changes, not just turning the lights off. But I would first want to know, can we do it going forward? And everything we put in, such as the hard courts and everything, that we comply with this, and then maybe somehow get this into our strategic plan so that we can budget it before we go forward with looking at making all of the changes that are going to have to be made. And maybe it won't cost a lot, but if I just don't see anything that tells me how much that's going to cost.
I would agree. And that's why I would say that we would need more research, but it's my understanding that, the city of Wildwood is pretty cognizant of lighting to begin with, and it would only affect the lights that are actually in the park. It wouldn't affect the lights that are in the rest of the city. So therefore, that would limit the expenses. But yes, it would be something that we would have to look into moving forward.
Deborah, go ahead, please. Rob, I got you next. Deborah, I think you're muted, Deborah.
You're muted, Deb.
Sorry. My first thought was, how's this going to benefit Wildwood? Because we are very cautious about our lighting concerns, and that always comes up whenever we're going to do something that is typically a dark area or might impact an area that is already has too much lighting, that we think, especially like there at Clayton and 109. That's been a huge discussion about night skies for quite some time. And the other factor was how's this going to benefit us, and then cost as well.
Thank you. I guess that's what we need to find out, right, Deborah? Yeah. Rob, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I just want to point out the obvious, that cities need light, tennis courts need light, parking lots need light, and so forth. And you can install fixtures that shine up into the sky and cause lots of problems and cause a glow from 5 miles away, or you can shine all those lumens, or virtually all of them, down on the ground where they're doing the actual good. And so it's a kind of a win-win. The sky stays darker, but the ground is well lit. And I think that, as I interpreted the suggestion, it was more of a public education and and I was suggesting that we go forward and ensure that all lighting is night sky compliant, because my lights are all night sky compliant on my house, for example, and they shine down. It can be as bright as day, but it's not, you can't see my house from the road because it's not shining, there's not extraneous light going everywhere. So I just want to point out that this doesn't sound like it would cost us a lot of money to be in the program, making the statement that we're trying to protect the night sky and do a better job at probably a pretty modest cost. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Teresa, go ahead, please.
To follow up, that I forgot to mention, we probably would need to work together with our police force, because I'm sure that they have certain areas that need specific lighting.
Good point, Teresa. Thank you. So, Melanie, what are you looking for from us tonight?
A recommendation on if this is a direction that this city would like to pursue. If so, then we will look into it further and determine whether the cost benefit of the program is worthwhile or even feasible, given the number of staff and hours that we currently have and overall expenses. And if that's the case, then we'll look further into it. If it's not a direction that we would like to move, then we'll just stop here.
Okay. And I know 25 hours doesn't sound like a lot of time, but it's a lot of time for very busy staff. And so does anybody want to make that a motion that we pursue this a little farther and see what's entailed? Teresa, you making the motion, Teresa?
Yes, I'll make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Rob, I guess you're seconding the motion?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So, and similar to the previous item that was on the agenda, at this point, we're just kind of doing some investigative work, correct? Not necessarily committing to anything, because I also don't want to, we want to see what this means for the, city in the future. So,
Correct.
So,
okay, go ahead again, Rob.
yeah, I just would like to ask, does the department think this is a good thing for us to do? And are you willing to slide aside other work and make the time for this initial investigation? I don't know if that's a Melanie question or Joe question.
Well, I'm going to jump in here.
As director, I think it's for Joe.
So from the department's perspective, we do have regulations that are intended to protect the night sky. And on implementation, when a project is complete, I can guarantee you that they are compliant to night sky requirements. It's what happens after the first bulb burns out or a new tenant moves into a space, right, and all of a sudden, we don't know that changes are being made, and those changes oftentimes increase the illumination levels, the temperature of the light, and overlight circumstances, and then it becomes an enforcement issue relative to a residence or business. So I'd like to just first and foremost say we are trying very hard. You don't have to look far to the north, to the south, or to the east to see where a lot of our light pollution is coming from. It's the Chesterfield Valley. It's the Eureka Business District, the I-44 corridor, and then all the municipalities to the east. So I think it's important that we proceed forward, at least in terms of investigation, so that we can do maybe a better job of public education so people understand why it's important to have fully shielded light sources, why it's important to have flat lenses, not oval lenses, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the time would be worthwhile. And if community park can become an educational tool for that purpose, all the better.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions? Deborah, I see your hand up, but did you just forget to put it down when you spoke?
I just forgot to put it down. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem, no problem. So we have a motion on the floor to investigate this as well. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Me, Dan.
Dan, Flasher, we have one opposed. Any abstentions? Okay, thank you, everyone. Next item on the agenda, the overview of recent development trends within the city of Wildwood. Melanie, this is for you as well.
Again, this is a relatively new report that the city has been giving to the committee members. It's informational. It doesn't need any action. If you have any questions on it, I would be happy to answer them to the best of my ability or defer to Mr. Vunich.
Okay. I did notice that you included the wards. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. I'm sure everybody else does. Anybody have any questions or anything for the department on this? Teresa, go ahead, please.
I think last month we had made a question about the Mergen Temple, and if there was a process for changing the name of the street, and I think the department was going to get us that process.
Well, I apologize if I failed to remember that. There is a process that is established by code, and I'll provide that to you via email tomorrow, and you can kind of review it from there. Just to kind of update you on it, there have been no communications over the past month between the representatives of the temple on the State Route 109 Turkey Track Road location. It's been kind of quiet on that front, but we'll certainly get you the information tomorrow so you can review it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions for the department? All right, that takes us to the next item on the agenda, introduction of sound analysis on State Route 100 and 109. Joe, go ahead, please.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, what you have as part of tonight's packet is a memorandum from the Department of Planning, as well as the initial draft report from Acoustic Associates relative to the two major arterial corridors in the city of Wildwood, State Route 100, State Route 109. The intent of presenting this information tonight is not to solicit action or necessarily delve too deep into the report itself, but more so to provide it to you with the understanding that over the next month, a revised version of the report will be provided to you probably in the next day or two that addresses a couple of the questions that Rick Brown, our Director of Public Works, had in this regard, as well as the Department of Planning. What the department would respectfully request is that once you receive the updated report, that you take time to review it. And if you have any questions, to provide those questions to the Department of Planning by the end of this month, November 30th. Those questions will be forwarded to Acoustical Associates, the consultant, and they will be attending the December meeting to address any of those questions that are provided, as well as respond to questions, suggestions, and comments at the meeting itself. I would note that a number of the locations were identified by committee members that are shown on the aerial photograph. And as you can see, noise levels are what I would consider high, but do not exceed currently what has been identified as the standards. I've asked Dr. Thunder, the principal in Acoustical Associates, to do a little further research as well, just to verify some of the numbers. So tonight, it's an introduction. If you have any questions or comments now, I'll be glad to accept those. We'll get those to our consultant. But again, by the end of the month, November 30th, if you have anything you'd like relative to the revised draft that you'll receive in the next day or two, I would appreciate it very much. And then we'll have a fruitful conversation, I believe, at the December meeting, and hopefully direction from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, and I'm sure we can accommodate that. Deborah, go ahead, please. Teresa, I got you next.
Joe, it was a little hard to tell from looking at the map on the computer screen, but were there are sound levels taken at the roundabouts?
There were sound levels taken in the vicinity of State Route 109 and State Route 100, so that pair of roundabouts at that location. The extent did not reach up to Pine Grover Parkway and State Route 109. At least I did not determine that, but that's a question I will ask Dr. Thunder and Steve Thunder, his son.
Because I know that the residents right there by Canberry Place and then the ones there at Pine Grover Parkway have been letting us know that the noise level has been quite higher since the roundabouts have been put in. So I think that's really something that we'd like to have an answer to through this study.
I'll identify those two locations specifically and ask for additional analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Teresa, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I had 3 points to maybe offer, Joe, for you to take forward to the Acoustic Associates. The first one is that on the 2 figures that are shown in the second page of the Acoustic Associates letter, I kind of think that they're labeled incorrectly. The first one looks like, because of the concentration, that would have to be the daytime sound level contours. And the second, figure 2, would have to be the nighttime. In the verbiage, it does say that figure 1 is daytime and figure 2 is nighttime. But then when you get to the figures, they're labeled opposite. So I was just a little confused when I looked at it and saw the concentration level. So I think it's the figure labels that's wrong. And like Deborah, I would like to see all of the locations, all the 12 locations that they tested on the map, so we know exactly where they were tested. And the third question is, did they also do a frequency analysis like they did at the fish pond location, just to determine if the road surface or tire noise or electrical networking or whatever was causing a discrete tone in those areas? That's all I have. Thank you.
Ms. Clark, I concur with your assessment of your first point. It appears that the graphics are mislabeled, and obviously the one that has the greater extent of red extending from the corridors is the daytime. When I talked to Dr. Thunder today, he was investigating that, and he sent me an email and saying that it is incorrect and it will be corrected in the revised draft. The other two items I will identify and ask that the consultant address those. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. I know Deborah mentioned the roundabouts for Canterbury, which is accurate. The one other thing I was going to ask you, Joe, is one of the other areas of concern for the folks in Canterbury specifically is the eastbound ramp onto 100 from 109. I know that that's a source of significant levels of noise and speeding and acceleration that takes place, especially at night. That is troublesome for those. So I want to make sure that that's included.
I'll make sure that they're aware of that concern, sir.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions for Joe or comments? Okay, well, we'll look forward to your report coming out in a few days, and we'll get back to you by the end of the month, Joe.
Thank you very much. And like I say, you know the community better than anyone. So again, anything you think of by November 30th, if you'll provide to us, we'll make sure that it gets addressed or at least can be referenced in the report. Thank you again.
You're welcome. That takes us to park matters. First item on our list for park matters is the presentation of a proposed phase 1 plan for Village Green. Melanie, go ahead, please.
Chair and members, I am going to share my screen with you so that we have a visual of the Village Green. Is that coming through okay?
Yep.
As you're aware, the city recently approved the final version of the Village Green. However, due to the overall expenses of the project and the city's immediate need for a public space to host events due to the Prime Place development, we will be losing our space where the Wildwood Day celebration has been taking place. And so it's becoming time sensitive. Therefore, we have been working with Human Nature in order to work on phasing the development. What you see before you is the first phase that was proposed, which will give the city a usable space, but without all of the additional water features and such. But it will give a place for gathering and hosting events and concerts and such. The city has been working on a way to determine the best way to utilize the $1.3 to $1.4 million budgeted, which also includes a park grant. The proposed first phase is shown here, and as you can see, there's a project total listed on there, and the project total still exceeds the 1.3 to 1.4 million that is budgeted. But there are also alternatives listed under there intended to be able to cut costs. Some of these do differently or potentially do at a later point in time, like the retaining walls. So essentially, the city is requesting feedback and authorization to proceed to the next step, which would be obtaining a proposal from Human Nature, hopefully in early 2022, which optimistically we could go out to bidding in 2023. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, we'll start. Hold on. So we'll start with questions. Mike, I saw your hand go up first. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was wondering with the passage of the recent infrastructure bill, is it possible that we can explore potentially getting any additional funding for this project, potentially in its entirety or at least a portion thereof for the multiple phases with that now, or is that something we've already explored prior to? Or
Good question.
Honestly, I'm pretty new here, so I would defer to Joe on that if he has an answer. If not, we'd be happy to get back to you.
Joe, go ahead, please.
Councilmember Galani, I've been talking to Mr. Cross about that for a bit of time. We were all hoping that the infrastructure bill would finally be passed. And so it's something that's on Mr. Cross's radar, so to speak. And if it is available, certainly it'll be an option that's presented to the committee as well as City Council.
Thank you, Joe. Rob, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. I'm having trouble orienting myself on this plan. I walked the whole site. It's been a few months, but there were some very nice mature trees left over from the residences, sort of in the center. It looks like in the ellipse, and it looks like you're taking out a whole bunch of trees, but there's a row along the side that I don't even really recall other than a fence row of scrub and so forth. Joe, can you, Melanie, can one of you all kind of speak to the tree removal? I know you can't save them all, but are the X's for removed trees, are those the nice ones, the nicest ones there in the center of the land, or am I looking at it the wrong way?
So please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Vunich, but yes, the X's are the trees to be removed. And it's my understanding that most of those are smaller trees and not the big, beautiful trees that we're trying to save. And again,
so my question really is, we are saving some of those big, beautiful trees for people to enjoy in the park. And then we're taking out what we have to, but hopefully those are mostly dead or dying trees. Is that what I'm hearing?
Some of them might be living trees. But if you look at the design, the circles with the dot in the middle, the white circles with the dot in the middle, those are all trees to be preserved. Those are existing trees, and the smaller ones with the X's in them are the trees to be removed.
Yeah, my question was because the X's to be removed, that's the place where I believe I recall the nicest trees being, but I don't recall the dotted trees except for scrub. So the real question was, are we saving some of those big, beautiful trees? And the answer, it sounds like, is yes.
I believe so.
Okay. All right.
And
Thank you.
and with the permission of the chair,
Sure, go ahead.
as part of the development of the master plan, Davie Resource Group, Andy Berg was asked to do the tree stand delineation. We have that information, and so we'll provide that to the committee and you as well, obviously, Dr. Rambo. And you can see what the assessment was on those trees that are shown to be removed and the ones that are to be preserved. We have a great deal of confidence in Davie Resource Group.
Yes.
We also recognize that for the purposes of this public space, the village green, some of those trees that may be removed would be trees that normally we would prefer to be preserved, but to accomplish the goal of the oval, the future pavilion area, stage, we're just kind of left with not very good choices. And sometimes those choices do mean that certain trees are removed that we would, as I've said, prefer to stay.
Sure, you can't save them all. My point was that this would be immediately a nice space if we save a couple of the big ones, and that's all I was kind of suggesting. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rob. Melanie, what are you looking for from the committee tonight?
We are respectfully requesting authorization to proceed to the next step, which would essentially be obtaining a proposal from Human Nature to move forward and hopefully receive a proposal in 2022 and optimistically bidding in 2023 and construction thereafter. So, yes.
Don, I had my hand up. I have a question before any
I got you,
motions are
Jen.
made.
Okay, well, go ahead then, Deborah.
So my concern is if we're going to do this in phases, is there going to be anything that we do during this first phase that will have to be undone to come back and put amenities in?
It's my understanding that, I mean, as close to being undone as you can see paths that are done, essentially going to be done in like wood chippings or mulch over on the more natural side of the park, which will then be developed at some point in time into the like waterscaping and the kids' play area, but they're mulch paths.
And then my other concern is right now, this is only costing a little over $1 million, but I believe the price tag for the completion was like $3 million. Is that correct?
For the completion of the entire project?
Yes.
No, that was significantly higher than 3 million. I believe it was
Okay,
closer to 12 million.
Yeah, anything that we spend above 3 million has to go back to the voters. So I'm this may be putting the cart before the horse right now, but so what is our plan in order to complete this project for anything that goes over 3 million? My concern is that we're going to start it and then we may not be able to complete it in its entirety as we had proposed. So I don't know.
That's
Joe,
always a possibility. However, this first phase would give us a usable space, even if it never went any further than this. It would give us a good space in order to host events. You know, it's been my experience that doing something like this in phases, people tend to get into the space and want to see the other features that were advertised, you know, at the point in time in which, you know, conversations were being had about said project. But I would defer to Mr. Vunich to elaborate on future funding as far as that's concerned.
And with the permission of the chair.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that you have had conversations with City Attorney Young on this as well.
So Ms. McCutcheon, at this stage, it's really a policy issue for the committee and then City Council. Do we want to basically present the entirety of the project at $12 million plus number that Ms. Ripito mentioned to the community before we start? Or do we want to give them an opportunity to see the value of the 6-acre tract of land, albeit just through phase one, and also have a location for our concerts or Celebrate Wildwood event, etc.? So today, Ms. Ripito, Mr. Newberry, and I were actually discussing, we probably need to put something on the committee's agenda about how we want to proceed. Do we want to jump into a phase one, or do we want to go to the voters first and see what their inclination is? That's a policy issue, I think, more so than a legal one at this stage. And so what we'd like to do, as Ms. Ripito's mentioned, is at least get a proposal for Human Nature for the design and engineering component of this phase one, so that we can see how much it's going to cost to create those engineered plans and bid specifications, so that if the city council does decide to proceed forward, we're ready to go and get that started. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, Joe. So the department's looking for a motion. Dan, are you making that motion, or do you want to speak, please?
I am making that motion, Don, and I thank you.
Thank you. And we have a second from Mr. Galani, correct? Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? I'm on a smaller screen here, so bear with me. Okay, so seeing no other questions, all those in favor of moving forward with the department's recommendation and the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Melanie, for the presentation. That takes us to the next item on our agenda, the review of Bluff View Park. Joe, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Ripito, could you unshare your screen?
Yes,
Thank you.
maybe.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as you know, Bluffview Park has been a subject of many discussions amongst the members over the past year plus of time. Most recently, the Department of Planning and Parks provided the committee members architectural type renderings of the main activity areas. Tonight, we're moving a step much further along in the process. As part of the packet, along with the memorandum, there are the engineered drawings that are being prepared by the park consultant for ultimate bidding purposes. They are at about a 75% completion rate. And so the department wanted to provide those to the committee members to basically kind of tie the architectural renderings together with what I call the flat plan. That actually shows you how it all works together and the grading associated with it, along with some specifics about some of the site furniture and amenities associated with the park. Tonight, the department is providing them for your information. And certainly if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, this would be an opportune time to hear them. And if there are no suggestions, comments, or let's say questions, the department is ready to authorize the park designer to proceed to completion so that we can hopefully bid this project either at the very end of 2021 or as we enter into the new year 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And Joe, do you need a motion from the committee to do that?
I would prefer a motion, sir, just that if there's support of what we have before you tonight, that we proceed to completion. And once the set is completed, the committee will see them again, obviously. But I'd like to utilize this time before the end of the year to get to that 100% mark.
Great, thank you. So any questions for the department? Teresa, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Brenich, on drawing C2, it shows the parking spaces. And I know I sound like a broken record, sorry, but those 4 ADA accessible spaces that they have, on the sides of them, there's the slash marks. Are those for van accessible, or do we have no van accessible ADA spaces?
Those are not van accessible designated spaces. It is missing a van accessible space. And so that is one of the comments I'll take back to the park designer. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Joe? He is looking for a motion. If anyone wants to make the motion. Made by Councilmember Flasher, seconded by Councilmember Galani. Any other questions or any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you, Joe. Next on our agenda is the consideration of Friends of Bellevue request for pre-funding of a reimbursable grant application. Joe, go ahead, please.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, approximately 2 or 3 weeks ago, the representatives of Friends of Bellevue scheduled an appointment with Mr. Cruz and I to talk about a potential grant opportunity that they've been notified by the Missouri Department of Conservation. in that conversation that Mr. Cruz and I had with the representatives of Friends of Bellevue, they noted that this particular grant application is a little different than most in that it requires pre-funding of the grant amount by the applicant once the applicant's aware it's been awarded, and then it is reimbursed thereafter once the work is complete. Typically, the process is opposite that. Friends of Bellevue has been undertaking fundraising, but does not have the $25,000 available. And there is a component of matching grant of $8,000 that has yet to be determined between the two parties, Friends of Bellevue and City of Wildwood, in terms of disposition. But tonight, the department is presenting this request from that not-for-profit organization. The money certainly will be available in 2022 to pre-fund and then be reimbursed in full. And there is money available for a portion of the matching grant component, that $8,000 in the budget for 2022 as well. It's a little unusual. And unfortunately, I've spent the past 2 weeks trying to talk to the gentleman, Mark Gruber, with Missouri Department of Conservation that oversees the grant program to get further details, which I was unable to make that contact after multiple tries. But tonight, the department is advising you of the request of the not-for-profit, advising you that in 2022, the needed matching grant amount will be available, as well as enough to pre-fund this application and be reimbursed. And this is consistent with the efforts that have been underway at the property, the 99-acre site, and that invasive removal has occurred, tree thinning has occurred, and for the most part, work has begun on restoring the native prairie to the 5+ acres that defines the front of the property. So a lot of positives have been underway, but again, this is an opportunity that came to Friends of Bellevue. They brought it to the city, and I wanted the committee to hear it and provide direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And I got a couple hands up, but before I get to them, Joe, is like 2 questions. Like the first one would be, is there a risk to the city on this? And then my follow-up question would be, is this kind of like the future for grants? Do you think that, you're gonna have to finish the work and then get the money?
Without being able to talk to Mark Gruber of Missouri Department of Conservation, I'd have to assess that there is a limited risk. I just don't know enough of the details. And when Gary and I met with the organization, they did a good job of trying to explain it, but I would like to hear it from the grant provider. So I would assess some risk. Is this the future? I don't think so. I think that the MDC, Missouri Department of Conservation, has a range of grant programs, and I think they're trying different approaches to see what is most effective and gets the grant completed in the quickest amount of time. But as you know from East-West Gateway Council of Governments, the Municipal Park Grant Commission, the work is always completed before the reimbursement occurs, but we don't have to necessarily front the entire amount. And so I don't see this as a trend that'll continue, at least in most of the grant opportunities the city pursues. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, go ahead, please. And Deborah, I got you next.
Okay, thanks. First is a question. Joe, I had a little trouble understanding the verbiage. This represents an $8K net cost to Wildwood after we're reimbursed for the grant funds that they're asking us to front the organization. Is that the case?
Dr. Rambo, that would be the worst case scenario, but in the opinion of the department, I think Friends of Bellevue would be responsible for part of that $8,000. I don't know what part that would be. Again, without being able to talk to the Missouri Department of Conservation, I just have a lot of unanswered questions.
Okay, sure. And they're doing great work for a bargain, sort of a bargain basement price. I walked that whole site. It took me hours, and it's beautiful. The restoration work is well in hand, and it's happening with volunteer labor, which is a great thing. So my questions concern, well, first of all, this isn't actually in the city limits. Is that true?
It is outside the city limits, but we share a common boundary. The northern boundary of Bellevue Farms Park is the southern boundary of Wildwood.
Okay, and so so essentially, we have it on such favorable terms for this long-term lease or whatever from the county that we can consider it part of Wildwood, even though it's really unincorporated county. Is that also the case?
Yes, that's correct. Our lease goes through 2039 with St. Louis County with an option for an additional 25-year extension. And so both county police as well as Wildwood Precinct County Police patrol the area.
Okay, so it's a bargain from my perspective, but have the Friends of Bellevue pursued county funding, or since the county actually owns it, and if we decide to give it back to them in 20 years, not it's 18 years, they will get a whole lot of work for nothing at Wildwood's expense. And so it makes sense to at least ask the county if they can kick in. Has that been done?
I don't know if Friends of Bellevue has contacted St. Louis County and explored participation. What I've been told by Friends of Bellevue is that the Missouri Department of Conservation has identified this particular site as a priority, and they are spending a great deal of time, not only through their grant programming, but through expertise to make sure that this restoration is as successful as any they've attempted in the St. Louis region. So I can certainly contact St. Louis County and see available funds. Oftentimes what I'm told by representatives at St. Louis County is they can do things in terms of work, but not actual funding. So if there's an opportunity for them to come out and, let's say, manufacture signs for the purposes of identifying tree stands or different types of native plantings, or if there's work that could be done in terms of securing a building, oftentimes St. Louis County and their crew at the Department of Parks and Recreation can do that for us.
Yeah, that's great. We could cooperate because there are those evocative historic buildings there that are just kind of falling down, and they're also doing a lot of trail restoration, which is labor intensive and so forth. If we can get some of that, it's a fantastic place. But the more work we can get from the county, the happier taxpayers in Wildwood will be. Because we don't necessarily own the property. So, okay, great. By the way, I fully support this project. I think it's fantastic, and it's a bargain.
Thank you, Rob. Deborah, go ahead, please.
Good suggestion, Rob, about St. Louis County partnering with us as well. I have concerns only because there's too much unknown. So, I would feel more comfortable if, Joe, if you could get us some more details before we vote on this. I just think there's too many unanswered questions, and my guess would be that John Young would get involved in this process if we prepaid for this grant. Is that the case, Joe?
Yes, there would be an agreement that's provided from the Missouri Department of Conservation that Mr. Young would review and ensure that the details of that agreement are favorable to the city, not just to other parties.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Joe, is there a risk to the funding or to the project at all if we do wait till the next meeting for you to kind of get your answers?
Well, when Mr. Cruz and I met with the representatives of Friends of Bellevue, this was kind of a surprise opportunity to them that MDC brought forth. And there is a time frame associated with it because the money can be allocated elsewhere. But as I've mentioned, if I had answers to several of those questions that were posed by committee members and a better feeling myself, I would argue more strenuously. But if we can wait till December, and if MDC is patient with that process, I'd prefer to wait till December.
Okay, that kind of goes along with what Deborah was saying. So Deborah, without putting words in your mouth, do you want to make a motion do you need a motion to postpone this, Joe, or we just not vote on it?
Kind of tie the loose ends and be able to provide a specific action to the volunteers at Friends of Bellevue. I would respectfully request a motion to postpone to the December meeting.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you, Joe.
I'll make the motion, Don.
Okay, thank you, Deborah.
I move that we postpone any action on the Friends of Bellevue's request for consideration with funding until our Director of Planning and Parks can come back with additional information.
Well summarized, Deborah. Thank you. So we have a motion. Do we have a second on that motion? Seconded by Councilmember Galani. Any discussion on the motion to postpone till the next meeting? Okay, so all those in favor of postponing, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. That takes us to the next item on our agenda, which is an update on in-person and virtual recreation programs. This is typically just an FYI for the council, but Gary, do you have any comments or you want to make, or?
No, sir. Any questions? I can answer any questions, but I have no comments.
Okay, any questions for Gary? Teresa, go ahead, please.
Gary, I'm just wondering, and I don't have any brainstorming on this, but is there anything that we can use the garden spaces for through the winter months? They're used so beautifully in the summer, but is there anything we can use them for in the winter?
Usually what happens in the wintertime is we do all the repairs that are necessary to the boxes and organize the materials in the shed and just do some routine cleanup, getting it ready for the spring planting. And the spring planting starts pretty early. So I mean, this couple of months will fly by pretty quickly. And we have to evaluate all the boxes to see what's rotted out. And then we have to get the materials to rebuild the boxes and so forth. So but I've thought of no other activities other than getting it ready for the spring.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Deborah, go ahead, please. You're muted, Deborah.
Sorry. I was reading in one of the reports that the portable restrooms are going up at different locations. And I was wondering, is there going to be a portable restroom at Green Pines Park?
Joe and I have been discussing that at length, trying to figure out a place to put one that wouldn't offend residents around the area. The problem is, if we try to put one on the inside of the park, then the portable water closet doesn't have access to it to do the cleaning that's required several times a week. And if we set it outside, like on the parking lot area, we feel it might offend some of the people, some of the residents that look out their back door at a portable restroom. But I'll defer to Joe.
Gary has stated it very well. I don't know if I lived in those houses near the park, if I'd want to look at a restroom facility for several months during the winter.
Yeah, we're in kind of a conundrum because we've got little bitty kids that are going to have to use the restroom facility, and I'm not quite sure how they're going to do that if there isn't one on site. If you guys can get kind of creative, I'd appreciate it.
Well, Public Water Closet has never failed us in being creative with solutions. So we'll get back to them, and hopefully in December, we'll have an update for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Gary? Okay, thank you, everyone. Brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is the update of the facility reservations and event registrations. This is also typically FYI. Does anybody have any questions or comments for the department? Okay, seeing none, we will then go into executive session. We do need a motion to go into executive session, made by Councilmember Farmer and seconded by Councilmember Flasher. We do need a roll call vote on this. So Mr. Cruz.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani,
Yes.
and Chair Bartoni.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, with your permission,